Hello and welcome to our program Newsroom. I'm your host Sharmeen Ali. The situation in Indian occupied Kashmir still remains at a standstill after 82 days of a lockdown and communications blackout in the occupied valley. Now, the Indian government claims that the situation is returning to normalcy, but we're going to talk about several accounts where journalists have been up there and articles that are coming out in the international media, at least because naturally Pakistani media does not have access to that region, and Indian media accounts are generally the state narrative. We'll be talking about what the actual situation on the ground there is right now. Also, we're going to be talking about the good news where Pakistan has moved up 28 places in the World Bank's Ease of Doing Business Index, and now it is at 108th place. It was one of the top 10 reformers in this list this year, and it is number 6 out of the world, number 1 out of Asia to implement these reforms for the ease of doing business. Also, we will be talking about the FATF grey list that Pakistan is still on until February of the coming year. Now, Minister of State Hamad Azhar, Minister of State for Economic Affairs, has said that 100 cases right now are under investigation currently to counter terror financing. So this is very significant that Pakistan is taking all these huge steps in order to bring the country towards FATF compliance. We're going to be speaking now to our guest who's with us in our studio to discuss these situations, particularly the one in Kashmir. He is a gentleman of Kashmiri origin. His name is Dr. Farhan Mujahid Chak, and he's a professor of political science at Qatar University in Doha, and he is also the chairperson of the NGO Kashmir Civitas. Thank you so much, Professor, for being with us here today on our program. Being a person from Kashmiri origin, I'm sure that it affects you very gravely, the situation right now in Indian occupied Kashmir. The accounts that we're hearing from the international media, because this is not a Pakistan versus India issue right now. It's a humanitarian issue, and it's a huge, huge crisis. So what is your opinion about what's happening over there? You're Kashmiri. Do you have family over there?
Yes, I do. I do have family over there. And for obvious reasons, I'd like to not disclose where they are. And
sure.
Because as is well known, what India has done is it attempted to silence any diaspora voice and threatened women, children as young as 9 years old are in prison at this very moment. I would not just characterize the tragedy of Kashmir as a humanitarian issue, nor would I characterize it as only a communication siege, which all of it, which is true. It is truly at the heart of the matter, a political issue. Kashmir has never been an integral part of India, but this is a trope that India has constantly, for the last 72 years, been pitching to the rest of the world. And to be honest, before August 5th, quite successfully pitching. And there's a long kind of story behind why that success took place. A lot of it had to do with the inability for Kashmiris themselves to market or to be the storytellers of their own story. But that has transformed. Now, India's worst nightmare has come true, that Kashmiris with roots in the valley are at the forefront of calling them out, talking about what is essentially, unequivocally, a military occupation. You know, this is the highest concentration of soldiers in the world in a given area.
Right.
And people don't know this. They don't know that this is disputed territory by the UN. So a lot of the tropes that India puts forward to the rest of the world are completely fictitious. And so our responsibility now is to unveil those falsehoods, to unravel that deceitful narrative and present a narrative that is coming from the voice of the people of Kashmir.
Right. So, Dr. Farhan, now a former Chief Justice of India has said that Kashmir is going to become India's Vietnam War. And he said that, if they remove restrictions, protests are going to take place. And if they continue the lockdown right now, then it's going to be like a boiling pot that's going to explode. So what are your views on these statements? Would it be like a Vietnam War?
Absolutely, that's the potential. You see, India's intent was to do a demographic change. They've been slowly chipping away at Article 370 since its inception. I believe this was a long-term plan to try to change the demographics of the region and repopulate it with people from the rest of India. Now, this has not successfully been tried. And to be honest, there's even another very interesting kind of and cunning maneuver that India was using to change the population. It had these schools set up in certain countries in the world,
Right.
teaching people, non-Kashmiris, the Kashmiri language, changing their last names to Dar and Butt. Imagine. And this I know for a fact because I was told this.
To change the demography of the region.
Absolutely, by
People
trying
who are not indigenous Kashmiris,
Absolutely.
they're teaching them to be Kashmiri so they can resettle
Absolutely,
them there.
and this is something that has not been talked about at all, but this is something that is happening. The school actually that's operating this teaching of Kashmiri language to non-Kashmiri speakers and also changing of last names is in Oman. And so this is something that I realized when I was doing my PhD in the final year, and I had come across someone who had told me this because they were in the classes. And but so there's so much that is now being exposed.
Right. So let's get into a little bit about what's happening there right now in the valley,
Sure.
because the Indian media and the Indian government are telling the world, they're trying to give an impression that some sort of normalcy has returned. But however, we're getting accounts from all the publications, international publications,
Right.
such as the New York Times, the Washington Post, Economist. There's so many of them. You can list, the list goes on and on.
Absolutely.
I'll refer to a Washington Post article recently that's saying that there's now apple pickers, it's apple season, apple picking season right now, and one trader was killed by militants because of the fact that they want to show a defiance. Now, at the same time, another farmer who has an apple orchard said that his son went out to pick orchards. I think he was around 13 years old. And he got detained by the Indian military. So these people, these farmers, don't know whether to be afraid of the militants or to be afraid of the military.
But that's actually a false narrative. And so that's something that India tries to project in order to delegitimize the legitimate right of self-determination of the Kashmiri people. So what it tries to pass itself off as saying that it's resisting the militants.
Yeah.
But this is a lie. And it's absolutely untrue. There are no militants killing the own Kashmiri people within the
And under
valley.
that pretense, the Indian military is going and rounding up all these
Absolutely.
children.
So they're using it as a pretense, so from which they can then delegitimize the entire struggle. That, oh, you see, they're killing their own Kashmiris. But that's in fact false. It is the Indian soldiers, more than 1 million, that happen to be in the valley of Kashmir that are killing the Kashmiri people. So they've always used this kind of false analogy and red herring, rather, to talk about Pakistan is doing it, Pakistan is sending it. But even according to their own reports, official reports, even according to the statements of Ajit Doval, that within the valley they had counted no more than 210 terrorists. Is it logical that someone put 1 million soldiers, lock down an entire people, cage them, take away their right of expression? David Hayes has called that the Special Rapporteur for Freedom of Expression at the United Nations. He's called that draconian. The world is in agreement. You know, there's no more lying about this anymore. You have caged the people. You have put them under military occupation. You have tried to cheat the world into getting them to believe that this is somehow an internal matter. It is not a bilateral issue. It is not an internal issue for India. It is a UN-designated hotspot, UN-designated disputed territory. And most troubling, and this is what has gotten quite a bit of press, and I choose my words very carefully, but Genocide Watch, a reputable NGO, has referred to the strategy that the Hindutva fascists have employed within Kashmir, and the rest of India for that matter, as absolutely a genocide alert.
Okay, so there's a genocide alert, and
Yes.
we've heard now concerns in the U.S. Congress.
Yes,
there was
we
a
have.
congressional hearing about this.
Absolutely.
A lot of the lawmakers, congressmen and women, they spoke up about this
Fantastic.
issue. We're seeing this now in the UK Parliament as well.
Yes.
We're seeing a lot of uproar about this all over the world. Now, what needs to be done further? Why is this not translating into some sort of action against the Indian government?
You see, it's complex. This is a 72-year problem. India does have economic and political clout. It's using every method of desperation to try to stop what's happening, but it has really been unsuccessful. On the diplomatic front, totally, completely, without any hesitation, Pakistan has won. And the case in point, the most stunning example of this is the mention of the Security Council, even though there wasn't a statement issued afterward. But the fact that the Security Council deliberated on Kashmir, proves it is not a bilateral nor internal Indian issue.
Right.
So how to move forward? There's a lot of strategy involved and a lot of things you have to take into consideration. And I like to say that in any problem, you have to look at all the stakeholders. So who are the stakeholders right now? I would say first and foremost, it's the people of the valley. the Kashmiris themselves,
Absolutely.
that are resisting day and night. You know, there are not just one or two neighborhoods. What's popular is Sura and Anshar area of Srinagar has dug up the road, has put barricades. There is a constant vigil making sure that nobody can come in and out. So there are dozens of areas of Srinagar that have come together as a form of a neighborhood watch to prevent the entry of these occupying forces.
Okay.
So that's internally what needs to happen.
How can they prevent the entry of these occupying forces? They're too strong. I mean, there's a very strong military. How can the citizens
there'll be
prevent?
bloodshed both ways. And so India knows it's being watched. It's being really careful to ensure that this bloodshed doesn't happen. And things are coming out. You know, for example, just to expose the Indian lies, which has now become a constant. So I feel sorry for how bad they're looking in front of the international press. There is no limitation, and they're getting caught every time, whether it's the fake terror pads that were bombed here and then Pakistan took the diplomats there to prove them wrong, or whether it's or even before with Pulwama. There's a history to this lying and deceit, and they're getting exposed in ways that they were never before. They're trying desperately to contain the situation, but I don't think they can.
Right. So in this article, the people that were interviewed in the valley, they were saying that Kashmiris are either going to end up in mental asylums or in jail. This is how grim the situation is.
It's absolutely horrible, and it's sickening. What other adjective could I use? Grotesque, what's happened to them. Not just now. You know, my mother used to tell me stories of the tens of thousands of Kashmiri women that were just agwa, hostage, taken hostage.
Right.
And then forced to live lives with other people of different faiths, of different backgrounds, forced to change their religion.
Right.
And some after 30 years came back to Pakistan to visit their family. Tragic stories of what happened to so many people, in particularly Kashmiri people in the valley.
Yeah.
So these stories of pain and suffering have a long history. The Jammu massacre.
Yeah.
You know, more than 300,000 people. That has barely scratched the surface in the international arenas about what has happened or what's happened in Gurdaspur. So there is so much that is now coming out, and we're going to continue at it. You know, Kashmiris are they're writing their stories through opinion pieces in all these journals. You'll notice that majority of them are Kashmiri origin, and with great support from Pakistan. The publications that are coming out are suggesting let Kashmiris choose.
Right.
That's a very fair and honest proposition.
Right.
And I think the stand that Pakistan has taken now is absolutely brilliant, and it's honest.
And how can we not? Because we're neighbors, and also there's so many Kashmiris in Pakistan. Kashmiri Pakistanis, we call them now. They're all here, and they're our colleagues and our friends also. So how can you ignore what their families are going through right next door? So now the Kashmiri people in the valley are saying that they've sort of entered a state of depression because they're afraid to send their children to school because they might not come back. You know, the military just raids their homes, they grab their children, detain them, and there's no way. And another fear that they have is once they've been detained under the Public Safety Act, once they are released, they're going to be labeled militants, even though they were just detained without any charge.
Absolutely. Not only that there's no recourse, no legal recourse on how to address anyone getting arrested under any whimsical charge. So it's not even, I wouldn't even call it a kangaroo court. It is a lawless law, is how Kashmiris have described how the Indian military treats the Kashmiri people. You talked about trauma, mental trauma and depression. It is on a massive scale. And there have been studies, academic studies done just on the topic of depression, manic depression, all kinds of PTSD. These are serious issues that are happening in Kashmiri society, and they've been ongoing for a long time.
Right.
People are now at a point, they say death is better. They prefer that they die rather than continue to look and live at their surroundings and under these humiliating conditions.
Right.
And this is all of this twisted type of coveting that Indian intellectuals have kind of forced upon the rest of India, in which they make them falsely believe that these were original Hindus that were forcibly converted to Islam by these outsiders, and we're bringing them back. You know, see, all of this is a lie. Now, according to Kashmiri history, none of this is true. There were never Hindus before. As a matter of fact, the ancient temples, there were Buddhists. Before that, Kashmiri history of itself talks about it being of the lost tribes.
Exactly.
This is something they say.
It comes down to, at the end of the day, personal choice, right?
Absolutely.
If they are Muslims and they're choosing to be Muslims and they want to live in the valley like that, who is anybody to say they were originally Hindus, right? So that is something that's beyond belief that they're actually putting that out there. Now you're also hearing reports about the hospitals. Now you have 10-year-old pellet victims there, 10-year-olds.
Even younger.
Even younger. And a lot of people sustaining critical injuries. I mean, there may not be gunshot wounds, but they actually do sustain critical injuries due to pellet gun use.
Absolutely.
And also they've got a shortage of essential medical supplies.
Absolutely, correct.
For example, morphine for cancer patients, and people are literally screaming out in pain in the hospitals.
People are dying because of this.
Yeah.
So what's interesting is the narrative that India has pushed is extremely deceptive. I would like to make clear that these are not pellet guns. This is what's called a buckshot shotgun. So it is deadly, it can be fatal, but what it's been used for particularly is to ensure blinding. Now imagine that the first time in written history that we've come across an instance in which a state, an occupying force, has indulged in the first mass blinding of a population.
Wow. And now people may ask that why don't they migrate and just leave if the situation is so bad there? It just seems like the Kashmiri people have become hardened to their circumstances, yet they do not want to leave their homes.
Well, it's their land.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, so many have left. Millions have come over into Pakistan, have come over in different waves. And in Azad Kashmir, we have registered tens of thousands of refugees that have come in different waves, whether in the 65 or 90s or even 2008. We're constantly getting these streams of people. You know, ideally India would love, but how are you going to take in 8 million people?
Yeah, and where will they go?
And where will they go?
Yeah.
And they're going to get up and leave their lands and their homes and their fields. It is India trying to cripple, to destroy culturally, psychologically, and physically the spirit of the Kashmiri people, but it has not succeeded and it will not succeed.
Right, okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Farhan, for joining us today and giving us all your views on this topic. And
Thank you so much.
I'm sure you're very concerned about your family over there, and I wish them the best. I hope they
so
come
much.
out of this situation. We'll be right back after the break. Viewers, stay with us, please. Welcome back. Now we're going to be talking about how Pakistan has made some significant progress in the World Bank's Ease of Doing Business Index. It's gone up 28 places on that index, and it's now number 108. The Prime Minister says that by the end of 2020, he wants Pakistan to be one of the most attractive places for investment. And the government is aiming that in the next couple of years that we come up to number 70 or 80. We're going to be talking about the potential for this to happen now with our guests in our studio. Today we have with us Dr. Farida Faisal, who's an economics expert. Thank you so much for joining us, Doctor.
Thank you so much, Sharmeen.
Can you please just get into a little bit, how significant is this that we've gone up 28 points, we've gone up 28 places, and this is over the course of 1 year that we've gone up so many points?
25 actually.
Right.
So, but it doesn't really matter that much. Exact percentage point doesn't really matter. What matters is that overall, there are improvements and there are opportunities. So let us, be very realistic about it. It's a very good sign.
Exactly.
Which means that now there is an opportunity for investment to come into this country. And more importantly, that would bring with it jobs. So the unemployment problem, that will, we have a chance to deal with that. Because eventually, you see, all these things matter if they affect the life of the common person. So, I mean, when there is going to be economic and business activity in the country, then eventually people will find jobs And that's
And
how,
there, Doctor,
you know,
there's about 2 million young people entering the
Yes.
job market every year. Is
yeah,
that right?
more than that, actually.
And then to absorb them, you have to have a robust investment and business climate.
Business climate where the youngsters themselves can become entrepreneurs and think about starting their own business rather than only relying on jobs, and most of all government jobs, because they're going to disappear.
Yeah.
The footprint of the government needs to be reduced, and that is the only way that we will go forward.
Right.
Because there's no way that the government or any other, one particular sector can absorb so many people. So you need the kind of business environment where the startups can flourish.
Right.
So let us hope that this is an indicator for that. But let us be very realistic. It is a very good first indicator, but it needs a lot of building
Now,
up.
this index is significant because
Yes.
when foreign investors come
Yes.
and look at a country, they look at this ease of doing business index, and then they select which country they want to invest in. So in that regard, we want to be at a good level over there, right?
Yeah, well, you see, at the same time, you've got, other agencies like the FATF warning that Pakistan is, in the grey list and that we might be, involved in terror financing. So when an international investor is going to look at your conditions, actually, he's going to go beyond these two reports. They know exactly what is happening on ground.
Yeah.
And on ground, improvements are taking place, and you can see it in both these reports.
Right. So in order to better facilitate the business environment, now when we talk about entrepreneurship, this is very important because
It
that's
is.
the engine of growth in the economy, and it's going to increase employment and everything like that. Now they said that the processes, the steps involved for, say, starting a new business have gone from 10 to 5. That's still relatively high, right? I mean, would you say that needs further streamlining? What is your opinion on this?
Absolutely. I think the fewer steps, the more it is digitized, the better it's going to be.
Yeah.
One window operations need to be encouraged. The special economic zones which are planned all over the country as part of CPEC, they need to be operationalized. So all these things, because they are in the planning stage at the moment, I think that if given these conditions, those things can also be made part of the system, then we can take more advantage out of these better conditions.
Right, and we're talking about now processes as well.
Yeah.
There's been significant improvement as far as setting up businesses is concerned as well, getting, say, electricity connections and things like that. They've streamlined. There's also a lot of concern about the taxes in the business community. There are corporate taxes to the extent of like 28 in your yearly cycle. That's also extremely high, and this is after the improvement.
Actually, the problem with taxes is quite complicated.
Right.
It is the point here being that there are fewer people paying direct taxes. That is the real issue. That the indirect taxes, they are already, the economy is burdened with them. But how to improve the tax to GDP ratio, where the tax is the direct tax from the wealthy. How you are going to tax the wealthy. So that is an issue, and that is an equity issue also. If an improvement can be made in that area also, then I hope that
why can't they be further condensed into less taxes, but you can, still get the same amount of tax?
It's not a matter of less or more taxes. The real issue is how complex is the tax system.
Complex, exactly. Meaning
so
like the less number of taxes to be filed, but still collect the same amount.
But still, if there are areas where money can be parked, through which money can be channeled out of the country, illegal money, and there is no trace of it. So all those things are related. So you see, whatever is the conditionality of the FATF, as well as the advantages that we can gain from this ease of doing business, if we align the two, you see, and make the kind of structural reform at the ground level, then you will see the real changes.
Right. Now, okay, so Basically these numbers were based on Lahore and Karachi
Yes.
figures. So Balochistan and KPK still need to be integrated into all of these practices, because there was a huge effort to integrate the federal and provincial departments in all of this to ensure better coordination between them. So yet we still have 2 more provinces to work on.
No, it's not like that. The point is that the survey was not conducted in these 2 provinces. That's about it.
Right.
I think that the survey is quite representative, and whereas it is mostly based on opinion of the corporate sector and some entrepreneurs as well, it could be a little bit more representative, but generally I think it captures very well the improvement in the conditions all over the country, not just these 2 cities.
Right.
It captures the conditions of the country quite well.
So in previous years, this ranking had slipped 50 points. What was the reason for that?
There was severe electricity shortages, then we had the problem of law and order. So, you know, those 2 major issues were there, law and order.
Security, exactly,
security was a major issue, you know, that has improved substantially, and inshallah, if, you know, all goes well, it will keep on improving. But still, you've got this belligerent neighbor, you know, on both sides. So let's hope for the best that things stay stable. But that is going to be critical. If we are not to slip back, then the security situation has to, you know, remain hopefully peaceful.
Right. Okay, so now Pakistan's investment level is half the volume of investment attracted by growing economies like Vietnam, India and Bangladesh.
Yeah.
Now it's half the level, meaning it can double, it can increase many times more. So in your opinion, where can we improve now going further? There are a lot of, I think just to get up, you know, these places takes a lot of effort and a lot of work and coordination between
departments. A lot
departments.
of work has been done by Board of Investment. Let us give them the credit for what they've done. 1.5 years is not a very long time, but in that time, a lot of things have been streamlined. So hopefully, if it is the same line is pursued and continued, we will see that many of the foreign investors who are at the moment looking at Pakistan to invest, they will come here. But you see, they need security for some, you know, span of time. So I mean, as you will see that as more and more investors come, the others will follow suit. So at the moment, it's wait and watch kind of policy.
Because the need for Pakistan right now, we were talking about the 2 million young people who come into the job market every year. The investment amount needs to double according to the previous Board of Investment Chairman, Harun Sharif. He just wrote an editorial about this, and it needs to double in order to absorb all those young people coming into the job market. So a lot of work needs to be done pretty fast, I would say. Otherwise, where will all these people go?
They will find a space for themselves, Sharmeen, if you ask me. But you see, the kind of jobs which they will be creating for themselves, the new economy, it's called the gig economy, right? As long as conditions are fine and it's easy to start your own businesses, you find this informal sector kind of, grows. But it is the formal jobs that we are looking for. So both things, if they can happen side by side, that would be the best. That is the only way really of solving this unemployment problem. At the same time, I would say that in order to have this formal investment levels elevated, as I said before, 9 economic zones have been planned all over the country. You are setting up a CPEC authority under the monitoring of the Prime Minister himself. So better steering of these special economic zones is what we need right now, because that can give results very, very quickly. You cannot put the system of the entire country right so quickly, you know. But what you can do is that you can create these islands where the economic activity can initially flourish, and then the same models can be applied to other places.
Right. So what further measures can Pakistan do to improve their small and medium enterprises? We talk about that a lot. We heard about that when the Prime Minister visited Beijing. So what measures do you think need to be taken?
What measures need to be taken is that these SMEs need to be integrated in global value chains.
Okay.
So what happens is that when these big investors, they come and they start setting up shop in Pakistan, they are not going to manufacture entire products here. They will be manufacturing some part of the products, and part of the manufacturing process is also services, smaller services which can be performed by these smaller players. So that is being, integrated into the global value chains. That is the only way forward, because we definitely need to get our exports up as well.
Yeah.
So, concentrating on that, and then the IT sector. That's a very, very important sector, particularly for small startups, because that kind of, if you have a great idea, that's what's really required there. The setting up cost is not that high. Accessing to the clients, the cost is lesser. So I mean, it's a good place where you can start off a business and later on maybe expand into the real market as well. Actually.
Right, and what about intellectual property laws in Pakistan? How well are they placed right now? Because naturally for entrepreneurship, you need intellectual property to be protected, and also the matters of settling disputes where businesses are concerned, how effective are those?
Well, I think that our judicial processes, like our administrative processes, need a lot of improvement, and many of them are archaic, even going back to the colonial era. So yes,
and backlogged and a little slow.
Backlogged, and yes, it needs to be updated. Technology needs to be used over there. You see, in FATF, our major issue, why we are still on the grey list, is because our conviction and prosecution rate is lower, and that is not a problem which is caused by the government. That is the judiciary's job, and the judiciary is overwhelmed because its systems are archaic. You see, so I mean, a lot of work needs to be done there. But if somehow through the use of technology or through other measures, reform, structural reform, I think if these institutions can be brought into the 21st century, right now many of them are not even part of the 21st century, then you will see changes. That's why I'm again and again saying that create these smaller islands first, where the rest of the regressive system does not affect or kill them right away.
Exactly.
Let them grow. Because the rest of the system, it's not possible to correct it so quickly.
Right. Okay. So now let's talk about women-owned businesses. Okay. There's only about 10% women-owned businesses in Pakistan, which is a relatively small number. There's women are 50% or 49% of the population.
True.
That should be significantly higher, even per the concerns of the Chamber of Commerce and all. They're the ones who are voicing these concerns as well. So how can we improve the number of women-owned businesses in Pakistan?
That's a real tough one, because you see, the gender discrimination starts at the cradle, really. Women are not groomed to, have a lot of self-confidence. And that is, or efficacy, entrepreneurial efficacy, is what starts a business, and that is lacking among women themselves. So nearly all these Chamber of Commerce, they have a women's wing now. Special incentives are also being given to women so that they can start their own businesses. But many times the problems are so deep-rooted in the way our culture deals with women and what is considered permissible for women, that just, kind of giving these kind of blanket incentives are not going to, give the kind of results. So it's basically, you have to go back to women's education and women's empowerment, and that is where the real change is going to come.
Right, so that's where I was going to come right now. We were talking about the education. Now, how can our universities better prepare our youth for the future skills that they're going to need for employment and to be entrepreneurs?
I think that the universities are now concentrating a lot in this area. All the universities have set up what they call, under the ETC guidance, Offices of Research, Innovation and Commercialization. These are called ORICs. So whatever new innovative ideas or innovative products that the universities can offer, they are there. The effort is made to commercialize them. But a lot of other activities need to be done. For example, there are many business incubation centers also which are working across the country, and they're doing a good job. So these innovation centers and the universities, because they are essentially doing the same task, they need to work together.
Right. Okay. So now coming to technology, now
Yeah.
I think this is going to be the key for Pakistan.
Yes.
Because when you integrate technology into all of these processes, a lot of the systems have now become online,
Yes.
which previously weren't, such as online portals for getting electricity, online tax filing, etc.,
Yes,
things
yes.
like that. Registering, registering businesses, that's also become an online process now. So a lot of things are becoming government-less. And you were talking earlier how government is going to shrink. So what do you see happening in the future where businesses and all are concerned? Do you see a very small role of the government and the one window operation that we speak of?
The government needs to be there, but its role needs to change. It now has to come in a regulatory role, you see. The regulation is not something which the private sector can do on its own. You need, regulatory bodies and authorities which can ensure a level playing field, because if the businesses themselves, they are there to compete with one another, who is going to make sure that the competition is fair? That's the government, right? So the government's job is going to change, and yes, the government has to become much more efficient, particularly the state-owned enterprises. The model for these enterprises you need to rethink the model, not that they are going to be totally privatized, because particularly like when we talk about education or when we talk about health, these are such important areas. You cannot leave it totally to the commercial sector. Otherwise, what about protecting the rights of the ordinary citizen? So that has to be done, and it is the government which is going to be at the forefront of ensuring that the competition remains along fair lines.
Right. And in your opinion, what are the key factors now that will ensure the growth of Pakistani businesses in future, their growth and further investment?
The conditions are already improving. In the future also, I think that if the businesses will see that the practices are fair and that they will have to improve their own efficiency to get forward, the kind of mentality where they are, cartels and new players are not allowed into various sectors, that mentality needs to be now shaken up. Right? Rent-seeking mentality needs to be now shaken up, and new players, smaller players need to go into the market and make the competition from a monopolistic competition to a more fair competition and a more perfect competition, because only that way the efficiency will improve, the prices will come down, and everybody will gain. But at the moment, what you have is these rent-seeking culture, which really needs to change. And the government can play a big role in that.
Right, okay. So thank you so much, Doctor, for joining us, Dr. Farida Faisal, on our program today, and for giving your very valuable insights on these topics. That's all the time we have for today's program, and we'll be seeing you next time on Newsroom. That's bye-bye from now, from me, Sharmeen Ali, and our team at Newsroom.
Of a business, right? To growth, how it can finance itself, access to credit, access to electricity, how many days it requires to get electricity. All the 10 major components of running a business are a part of this. That's why ease of doing business. It's not only ease, also cost of doing business, because for businesses to thrive, you need both of these variables coming down. And once you do that, see the big boys, the big industrialists, they can get away because they've got people in government relations, but the small and medium enterprises which are dynamic, which are innovative, right? The industries in Sialkot to exporters sitting in Gujranwala, all over Pakistan. These guys find it very difficult to grow and thrive. So by making it easy to do business for them, you really unlock the economy, because the small and medium enterprise is always the most dynamic sector, the place where 70% of all employment is generated. So this is the growth engine of Pakistan. And by doing this, I'm really happy that this government is now carrying forward this initiative, building upon it, and putting emphasis around it, Because this should be our national priority.
Right. Thank you so much for joining us, Naeem Zimidar, on our program Newsroom. Now we're going to talk about World Polio Day. As we all know that polio is one illness that's afflicted Pakistan, and it is one of the only two countries left now, Pakistan and Afghanistan, who still have this illness prevalent in the country. Now, the reason why polio does not go down in Pakistan is because of the fact that the regions that have polio have a high refusal rate due to their archaic systems and due to the fact that they have very backward sort of thinking about why their children should not get polio vaccines. So now Pakistan's efforts are increasing in order to rid Pakistan of this disease. So it's World Polio Day, and it's very, very important. The government has taken a lot of steps in order to eradicate this illness. So hopefully we'll see better results in the future and eliminate polio from Pakistan for good. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today's program. That's bye-bye for now from me, Sharmeen Ali, and our team at Newsroom. See you next time.